Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the sheep pen. Bah! No goats allowed. So I want to talk today more about blessings and curses, and I want to talk more specifically about curses that are intentional. Not the word curses that you might say in jest, or you might say and not really mean it, but intentionally cursing someone else. Is that something that Christians or good people in general could get away with doing? Is that something the Bible supports? Is that something that has a history in Christendom? And Sage, how do you feel about imprecatory prayers and curses said by Christians? And then also we'll kind of touch briefly on the kind of curses that can be put on you through witchcraft. And we'll also touch on generational curses, although I may do a future video just on generational curses. So, first of all, does the Bible support cursing somebody, damning them to hell, praying bad things happen to them? Can you pray that bad things happen to people? And I talked about this in the previous video, that I believe that if you do that, God will not answer that prayer. He will not answer a prayer that is unjust, that is not according to His will, that is evil in its intent and purpose. Okay? But demons would be more than happy to jump up and basically answer that prayer for you. And that by praying that way, you can actually loose demons into the world. But I want to talk specifically about imprecatory prayers as they appear in the Bible. There are imprecatory psalms. These are psalms supposedly written by David. And, of course, we're all familiar with the good psalms. But there are psalms that are very detailed in calling for the destruction and harm of your enemy. They're calling for God to intervene and destroy the enemy. When they mean enemy, they mean the human enemy that they're facing in a very specific and detailed way. And honestly, from what I can tell, Christians are kind of split on whether you're allowed to use that psalm against the people you're in an argument or disagreement with or not. Can you pray that psalm against your fellow man, right? And some will say, well, if your back is against the wall, if you were cornered, if you tried everything and they won't stop coming, if your life and the life of your family is in danger, then yes, you can pray these prayers. Does that fall within that level of righteousness we talked about? Is it something that God would do? Is it within the character and nature of God? Then you're likely to get God to answer. And what happens when the enemy answers? When you pray for something that God is opposed to, and demons step up and go, I'll take that order, and they follow through with this. It can look like imprecatory prayers work. The problem is that if you did find some semblance of acceptability, and you prayed some imprecatory prayer that was within the will of God, let's say as your last-ditched effort, and you got rewarded by God destroying your enemies in just the way that you prayed, then you would be in a situation where God did answer an imprecatory prayer. But it's really hard to tell, because if you're wrong and you fall on the other side of it, the devil might answer your imprecatory prayer and bring destruction to somebody else in an unjust way, answering your unjust prayer. And so, to me, this falls into the category of everything we do builds one kingdom at the expense of the other. I tend to keep my righteous indignation and anger against those who cross me aimed squarely at their demons. And I fall back to that saying where I love you, but I hate your demons. I love you, but I hate your demons. And I can pray that God destroys your demons, that angels are dispatched to drive them away in a violent way. But that doesn't mean I'm trying to destroy the human. I don't want to pray that something bad happens to your kids, or that you lose your job, or that awful things happen. And part of the reason is, even if I were by some loophole in the system allowed to pray like that in opposition to Jesus, who says to pray for your enemies, not to pray against your enemies, but he says, love your enemies. Pray for those who spitefully use you. And in another passage it says that when we do that, it's like dumping heaps of coals on their head. So when you pray for some people, when you pray for people who wrong you, who spitefully use you, who hurt your feelings, who do bad things to you, if you pray for them and for their prosperity, then the Bible tells us that that's the quickest way to get God to unleash his wrath, not to pray for God to unleash his wrath. There is a quote out of the book of Revelation where you've got the martyrs who are under the altar who are calling for God to finally bring judgment against those who killed them for their faith. And when will the earth avenge our blood? And that kind of thing. When will God avenge our blood? And so there is that kind of speech in the book of Revelation. And so as far as I'm concerned, I think that it's enough of a fine line that I just avoid it. I avoid any kind of imprecatory prayer against my human foes, as it were, people who are out to get me. And I tend to follow the Jesus recommendation and pray for them, not pray against them. And when I don't act against someone who is after me, when I pray for them instead of pray against them, when I pray that God helps them instead of praying that God destroys them, then what happens is it really fully unleashes karma against them. I'm washing my hands of it. I'm not taking any revenge upon my own self. When I do this, when I refuse to take revenge against my enemies, then it kind of calls God on the carpet, who says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I shall repay. So it puts the ball in God's court. And now by praying for them, by not taking revenge against them, then it forces God to bring his judgment against them. So rather than praying imprecatory prayers, and I do pray against demons, but I've clearly defined the difference between the demon and the human. And so, love the human, declare war on the demons, right? Bring God's judgment against the demons, not the human. Separate the human from the demon that is controlling or driving them. And when it comes to praying for somebody, I pray for them, and oftentimes it releases karma against them. If they don't, God's going to give them a chance. When you pray for somebody, God gives them a chance. But if they don't listen and they continue to come against you, even though you're praying for them, even though you're blessing them and they're cursing you, God will turn it on them. He will flip the script on them, and they will get hit with the same exact sort of thing that they're praying that will happen to you, or they're trying to make happen to you. Now, having said that, there is an imprecatory prayer that I will engage in. And it's only aimed at people who, or better yet, they're demons, but sometimes you can't separate them, you got to hit them both, right? But I do pray one sort of imprecatory prayer when I'm involved in spiritual warfare. And it's because it only prays that God does to them whatever it is they're trying to do to me. So if someone's trying to destroy me, I will return their curse back to them. Some will pray sevenfold. I just pray to reverse the curse. I have been known to pray to God to reverse this curse they put against me and send it back to the sender sevenfold, especially if I'm dealing with witchcraft. Witches know better, and they engage in it anyway. They're willful combatants. So against somebody who's a known witch, I will pray that their spell gets reversed on them and sent back to them sevenfold. And if they're not a witch and they didn't send a bad spell my way, nothing happens to them. I will pray one of those Old Testament prayers. God, make war against those who are making war against me. Contend against those who contend against me. If they don't make war against me, if they don't contend against me, then there's no problem. The only problem is if they make war against me. Then I'm praying that God would send that war back to them. Return to sender, as it were. I'm rubber, you're glue. Any spell you send towards me bounces off me and sticks on you. How's that? I'm rubber and you're glue. I like that one. That's from grade school. But as far as somebody not doing what I want them to do, or treating me in some subpar way, or as long as they're not trying to destroy me, or trying to destroy my reputation, or undo the work I'm doing, or stop me, or get in my way, it's not like I'm going to pray that God destroys somebody because they didn't do what I say. But that's what some Christians do. Now, I call that Christian witchcraft, because to me the definition of witchcraft is wielding authority or power that you're not authorized to wield. So it would be like, I don't know, I'm trying to find a good, it'd be like a kid possessing a firearm. They're not supposed to, right? Bad things happen. They're not authorized to handle that. So witchcraft to me is using spiritual power that you're not authorized to use. And so God's not authorized us to use his power to destroy our enemies and destroy people that hurt us. In fact, Jesus told us to pray for our enemies and to love our enemies. And so I can only pray that if people come at me, that what they're bringing towards me would just bounce back on them. And that's as aggressive as I will get. I don't call for their destruction. Now, I do know this. In a way, I kind of am, because I'm intentionally not trying to gain revenge on them. I'm intentionally not demanding that God repay them. I'm intentionally not taking vengeance. I'm intentionally turning the other cheek. I'm intentionally praying for my enemies. And when I do that, I know it's a recipe to force God to bring judgment to them. If there's judgment to be had against them, when you treat a person who's after you, when you treat an enemy like that, in that godly and very Christian, very Jesus way, then, as they say down in Texas, Katie, bar the door. Because the hammer of karma, the hammer of sowing and reaping, the hammer of God's vengeance is going to rain down on them like a hailstorm. It's just going to be, and it's just like clockwork. Every time I treat somebody this way, God always gets them. And I think that I honestly have seen God get people so bad who have wronged me. I'm talking, I've seen God take somebody's life because they tried to destroy me. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So if I have any feelings or love feelings or empathy or sympathy for a person who's trying to hurt me, and especially if I've warned them, I tell them, I beg them, hey, don't do this. Bad things happen to people who hurt me. Please don't hurt me. It's not a threat. You don't understand. God's got my back. Like, you don't get it. And they do it anyway. That if I have feelings for that person and I love that person, I'll pray that God has mercy. Lord, please just buffer your mercy. Just give them a little break, because I know if you did to them what I've seen you do to other people, it would break my heart. Right? If we're rivals, or I don't have a love connection with you, and you're not in my circle, and you come after me to destroy me, and I pray for you, I pray that God blesses you. I pray that that if I pray for your health and your well-being, it's almost like what you pray for somebody who has wronged you is kind of where God will get them. Right? So their health might go down the drain. You pray for their finances might go down the drain. It's almost like anti-prayer. Right? So I fall in the neighborhood of doing the right thing every time. I don't take the loophole of imprecatory psalms that one could take. I don't pray for the destruction of my enemies, except in that one situation where if I feel like somebody's coming after me, I will pray that God makes war against those that make war against me, and contend with those that contend with me. And all they've got to do is stop coming after me, and I'll pray that God stops defending me when that, I pray for God's defense, not offense. I guess the best offense is a good defense. So I pray defensive prayers. I share one of my most powerful ones with you after every of one of these videos now, where I pray about God's ring of fire and hedge of thorns of protection. And so, now, what happens when a purveyor of witchcraft, in league with the devil, puts a curse on you, and you pray that prayer, that God would return that curse back on them? If they prayed for your death, they're probably going to die. And I've seen this. There are dead people who have prayed for my death or tried to destroy me, who God repaid by, I won't even go, it's almost, it reminds me, the stories I could tell you, so many, remind me very much of like, what's that horror movie? Final Destination, where these people somehow avoid death, but death's not happy, so it just keeps coming at them. That's what happens when somebody tries to destroy me or tries to use witchcraft against me, and God returns that curse back to them. Some of them are freaky. One woman had a brain aneurysm that she tried to destroy me. It wasn't even a romantic thing. It's really bad when somebody, that it's off my radar, that I've offended in some way and I don't even really know how. And I offended them, especially if I offended them by just saying what I know or believe to be true, right? If I'm talking about God, they get offended by that. Then they try to destroy me. Woo! Or they try to do witchcraft against me, or Christian witchcraft, where they start praying imprecatory prayers against me while I'm praying for them. God's got no tolerance for that kind of thing. And so a woman that did that to me had a brain aneurysm, and then she languished for months in a coma before finally passing away. And oddly enough, I didn't know till years later that my own sister was her caregiver while she languished in the coma. So God is definitely going to defend you if you do the right thing. And I choose not to pray imprecatory prayers, and I didn't pray against her, I prayed for her. And in fact, I prayed that God would have mercy on her for destroying my ministry, because that's what she did. And there's nothing sexual. I had a disagreement with the organization I was involved in a minor theological disagreement that she threw down over. And she had enough power because her husband outranked me. He was a minister. And she decided to destroy me. And it destroyed their lives. I'm just telling you, it was... I put that right at the feet of what they did to me, that couple. There's more to it. It deserves its own video. There's lots of stuff like that. It's also generational, because I do what my dad did. You know, I do the same sort of things that he did. But when I was a young boy, a man threatened to break my dad's back, and within 30 days of that threat, this man drove his motorcycle into a diesel truck on a 2-lane highway head on, and broke his back up so bad he couldn't move from the neck down for the rest of his life. Broke his back, broke his neck, and he was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So you really got to be careful with cursing people, because if they're under God's protection, it could come right back on you. It's dangerous. That's just part of the reason that I don't engage in these kind of curses or this kind of Christian witchcraft. I'll give you an example of Christian witchcraft that people do this and they don't even see the repercussions of this. But my mom used to pray that when I was a cigarette smoker, that my cigarettes would make me cough. She would pray that I would get a cough so that I would quit smoking. And, you know, that's just a terrible thing to pray against your own kids. Like, hey, you know, make them sick and then they'll quit. Don't you want them to quit so they don't get sick? So, you know, when you pray against somebody that's protected by God, or you engage in a witchcraft type curse, even if you think you're doing it in Jesus' name, it's a good way to have the hammer of God, you know, smash you down in the blink of an eye, right? It's just, it's a commonality. Be especially careful going after people who are under God's anointing. When you go after preachers by name, hey, they may be corrupt, or they might be under God's anointing and you got it wrong, and it ain't worth making a mistake over. Because if you go after a man of God and try to destroy him or discredit him, if he's under God's protection, you're toast. you're so toast. I've seen it over and over again. I won't do it. I'll speak in generalities about the church and the direction they're going. But I rarely will, if ever, I don't think I've ever done it on this channel, just called out a religious person. You know, I complain about people who are television evangelists because I can see them misappropriating God's funds. That they're using money to make themselves more lavish and their church more lavish and their image more incredible and more, you know, they're spending money on themselves beyond just sustenance. If you support this channel with your gifts, know this: I'm paying my bills with them, right? You're paying for me to get a cup of coffee. You're paying for me to have lunch. You're paying to keep the lights on so I can charge the phone and keep the house lit. You know, you're keeping me alive, and any money beyond that starts to accumulate, if it ever does, it so far hasn't. God's just given me what I need to live on, what I need to survive. But if ever gets to be more than basic sustenance, then I'm going to look towards using that money to elevate other people or to start projects to make the world a better place. And so the idea of building these cathedrals and these, you know, there's just no reason to wear a $6,000 suit. How can a man of God wear a $6,000 suit? I don't know. Don't get me started down that road, right? But even then, I try not to call them out by name, and I try not to destroy their reputation. I just question their motives. But yeah, going after somebody, praying against somebody is has the same kind of negative concept as casting spells. So just like here's the thing about witches. Witchcraft works, but it doesn't work to the benefit of the witch. I've never known witches who could operate in their craft without turning it on each other. You want to see a sick, messed up, screwed up life person. Most witches, their lives are a mess because other witches are using the witchcraft against them. They make another one of them mad, and the next thing you know, it's spells flying back and forth. And even if you hit with a spell, if somebody's praying protection over that person, God might intervene in your situation and put you down. So, yeah, I let God handle all that. I just put it in His hands. Don't play with it. Don't play with imprecatory prayers. Just like you should say positive things about yourself, you should say positive things about the people around you. You should pray for positive changes in people around you. You should pray that people find Jesus. You should pray that people gain clarity and can see the enemy tricking them. Pray that they get discernment. Pray that their eyes are opened. When they pray against you, pray for them. All right, so that's all I wanted to talk about. I don't believe in praying these prayers against people. I don't believe in trying to get God to be your enforcer. But just between me and you, if somebody's treating you bad and you go to praying for them, it has the same effect as an imprecatory prayer. And you are in the clear because you did the right thing and you left it up to God. May the Lord bless and keep you. May His face shine upon you. I pray that the Lord surround you in His ring of fire and hedge of thorns of protection, that He send His mighty angels in sufficient rank, authority, and number to rout the enemy from your midst and make you victorious. And may God bless you with His peace. May you be enveloped in the peace of God. Until next time, on the sheep pen where no goats are allowed. Don't forget to support the channel. I need your help to keep the lights on. PayPal in the description. Email me. All that's all in the description. Send a snail mail to the P.O. box, whatever you want to do. But we'll see you next time on the sheep pen. God bless.